Hey guys, this is John, and welcome to another Climbing the Rating Ladder video. I'm playing Violin 1258. Let's play d4 in this game. This player is rated 1806. It's another 10-0, so no increment. But let's see what we get here. c4 against knight f6. Knight f6 on move 1 is the most popular reply to d4. It can be pretty flexible. Black now plays c5. I'm going to go d5. That's usually the reaction to this move. You don't want to take the pawn because black can easily win the pawn back. d5 takes space. And we have a Benko Gambit on the board, b5. Now, I'm going to play the line that I advocate in my d4 course on Chessable, which I'll remind you, I've mentioned it before. That's a completely free course. It's 45 variations. It's been around for several years. And I think it has something like 10,000 students on Chessable. It's really been a good resource for people trying to get their foot in the door of d4 openings. And I recommend taking the pawn, and then when black plays a6, which is the idea behind b5, offering a pawn on the queen side in hoping to open things up, you play e3 in reply. And you defend the pawn on b5, you open up the bishop. It's this philosophy I've often espoused of take the first pawn against a gambit, but not the second pawn. Think twice about taking that second pawn. So g6 played. I'm going to go knight c3. So black looks to be delaying the capture on b5. That's a common reaction. Let's play knight f3 here. Simply develop. So I'm ready if pawn takes to take with my bishop. And I like to play a4 when black delays the exchange because it's nice to reinforce this pawn. In some instances, it could even be an option to take with the a pawn if black initiates the trade. I can't do that yet if black were to capture because I would lose my rook on the a1 square, but often a maneuver that white plays is rook to a3. It's a maneuver I'm going to consider here because that allows the rook to be defended. So black goes queen a5, pinning my knight. I think knight e4 is a threat that we have to recognize here, but I wonder what black has in mind if I simply go bishop d2. It's my first instinct against this move. Yeah, I'm going to play it. So simply break this pin on my knight. I don't think I'm threatening a devastating discovery or anything like knight e4, but it's annoying for black that the queen is in the crosshairs. And I'm also not in a hurry to reduce the tension here. I already kind of made that clear by playing e3 back on move 5. But I'm happy to wait a little bit and see what black does in terms of the pawn tension. So d6 is played. That's a typical move. This is where I might think about this rook a3 move or developing bishop c4, bishop e2. Often the bishop does go to c4 in this line, but I like this rook a3 move, just giving myself that option of a takes b5. e4 is another move that comes to mind. But yeah, let's go ahead and play rook a3. First sip of coffee. Decaf, if you're wondering. I'm recording this at 7 p.m. And I hope you're all having a good week. It's been a good one around here. This is the first chess that I played today, actually. Didn't do a stream or anything. But even if I'm not playing chess on a given day, I feel like I'm thinking about the game a lot. All right, bishop d7. So this strikes me as a little awkward in terms of the queenside knight, because where is this piece going to go now? Black's not threatening to take, so my instinct is just to continue normally here. Bishop e2 or this e4 move. e4 doesn't exactly look necessary to me. Briefly thinking about other moves too. Again, knight discoveries. Bishop c4. I just wonder if white can go, or black rather, can go queen b4, hit the bishop and also the pawn here. I mean, maybe b3 drops the knight. Maybe something like queen b3 at that point. But I don't see an enormous advantage to having the bishop here versus e2 at the moment. So I'm going to play the simple move and see what black does to try to unwind the queenside situation. One thing that sometimes happens in this line is if black puts the queen on b6, like let's say black retreats, we can play a5 and then b6 with tempo. So black retreats, but to c7, so that defeats that idea since now a5, black could take. a5 would not be coming with tempo. Probably castling. It's just straightforward here. Maybe e4, maybe h3. I could try to restrict this bishop. But yeah, let's stick to the easy move, the necessary move. Probably spent a little too much time on some of these moves. Bishop d2, rook a3, castles. I'm slowing down a little bit. But I really like my position here. Let's take back. And here you can see the point of having this rook backed up. Now I have two connected passed pawns on the A and the B files. Black has a protected passed C pawn, but the A and the B pawns must be more valuable here. Just having that one extra pawn. Certainly, if I can get them connected on the 5th rank, I'm going to be doing really well. All right, so knight h5, unveiling the dark square bishop. I don't think this is a threat. I have this backed up a couple times. Looking at a4. I could try to do something against this knight, like maybe move my knight, but a4 looks nice and easy. Yeah, let's connect things a little bit more. Maybe queen b3 to come. Get the remaining rook in the game. I do think it's fairly likely black's going to move this bishop sometime soon, because, again, if black doesn't move that light square bishop, I fail to see what they're going to do with their knight. Okay, queen a5, so this attacks the knight. I was planning queen b3 here. Let's go ahead and do it. On takes. It's nice that my a-pawn remains guarded. Wow, and black's capturing. Yeah, I know from experience, I used to play the Benko Gambit. It used to be my main weapon against d4. Up until I was about 2,400 USCF rating, by the way. I played it a long time. And I know from experience, if you play bishop takes c3 and you're not immediately gaining something in return, it's usually not good. Because that bishop is too valuable for black. Yeah, the queen retreats, and now I'm going to get this pawn roller. a5 looks really good. I mean, the other plan I'm considering here is bishop b2, queen c3, just load up. But I can't resist playing a5 with tempo. These two pawns connected. This is supported. So black really has their back against the wall here. Bishop takes c3. I don't exactly know what was going through black's mind with that exchange. It's not like there was something tactical in play. Maybe just lack of something better to do. But this position is pretty miserable for black. No threats. Yeah, I can roll these pawns still. b6 or a6. Probably b6 is the move. If I play a6, black can maybe go here and attempt to blockade. I think even that I could probably break the blockade, but b6 looks really good. I do open the light square bishop, but I fail to see after b6 how black's going to stop this for very long. Like bishop c8, I can play b7 and then a6. Queen c8, I can play b7 and a6. Notice the effect of this pawn on e3, so it really prevents the knight from jumping to the f4 square. Black does play queen c8, so b7 is looking good. I just want to make sure that my pawns can stay relatively connected. When you have connected passed pawns, you don't want one pawn typically to get too far in front of the other pawn. So one rank in between, as is going to happen when I play b7, is fine. But if you get into 2 ranks or more, that's where one pawn, usually the front pawn, can be vulnerable. You know, I'm also noticing I could play a6 here if I wanted. Idea, knight takes a6 and then b7. Hit the queen and sever the connection to the knight. So both look really good. I think both are going to win in a matter of moves. Yeah, I mean, I have the time here. b7's probably a little more forcing. Let's do it. Let's play b7. It was my first instinct move, but I think either of those was winning. Kind of keeping an eye out for c4 if black ever gets it in their head to counterattack, but it just doesn't work timing-wise. c4 I take with the bishop, keep this protected. And now a7 is an enormous threat. Not even looking to take the knight, just to promote on a8. Yeah, black takes. Brings the rook over. And now rook b1 followed by queen b6. Looks pretty obvious. I could embark on some knight maneuver too, like this, and then bishop a5. Yeah, they resigned. They didn't wait for my reply. Okay, so one-sided game there. Black never really demonstrated compensation. We'll go over a couple lines in this Benko Gambit variation, but I can wholeheartedly recommend this if you're looking for an anti-Benko weapon. There are a number of different variations you can play against the Benko Gambit. Probably taking the pawn is the critical move, but I've always liked e3 as a calm, strategic option against this Gambit where you're not really risking much from the white side and you still can obtain a good position. So thanks to my opponent, they said GG in the chat. Yeah, and just to speak about the level difference and what you guys see, I read your comments all the time, and sometimes there's a mild criticism. It's not even really a criticism. It's maybe an expression of frustration from some of the viewers that, oh, my opponents don't blunder in this way, or why don't my opponents do this or that? And the thing you have to realize is that you can't look at any single decision in a chess game, especially played by a master or something, on its own, right? So the level difference that you see and that I experience too when I play really strong players, that is the culmination of many small decisions, both in the actual chess moves and with things like time management, opening choice, culmination of many small decisions throughout the course of a game or a sequence of moves. So yes, a game like this was extremely one-sided. And you might say, well, why does this person deserve to be 1800? And I don't mean this at all to offend Violin. I'm sure they're legit 1800. But that's what can happen when there is a large level difference and the stronger players consistently making slightly better decisions and applying that pressure over the course of many moves. It can look one-sided. So just wanted to point that out. It's not like we can criticize anyone for, a single game or, a series of bad decisions even within a game, because we have to account for that level difference. At the same time, I'm trying to tell you why I think the way that I do in these games and how you can reach that next level and take advantage of typical mistakes. And, sometimes I find stuff I can improve upon too in these games. So my overall point, don't read too much into a seemingly one-sided game. That's often a natural extension of a skill gap in chess. But we can learn from these games nonetheless. So I'm going to look at, I think, the queen a5 move. That was the first move that kind of caught my eye as not being best for black. Often black does play d6, develop a knight here. The bishop can come to b7. Oftentimes they will take, bishop takes, and then try to put a piece on a6. So we can take a look at the opening database in terms of that. Yeah, by the time that black resolved this tension, I think this position is already very good for white. Taking with the a-pawn, when black takes here and I get the two connectors, I'm going to say this is probably already +2, +2.5. Let's take a look. Okay, engine says +1. I sometimes think the chess.com engine is a little more conservative than what I would personally evaluate a position. Yeah, it's suggesting black look for counterplay in the center. That is another idea. But let's click into the full game review. Okay, so 96.1% accuracy for me, 82.1 for my opponent. Nice gentle uptrend there on the graph. Yeah, so knight f6 is the most popular reply to d4. And then after c4, you usually see e6 or g6 at the higher levels here. But there are other moves too. d6, sometimes you see c6, knight c6 every once in a while, b6, and also c5, as played in this game, which is an invitation to the Benko or the Benoni. So c5 is not a bad move, and in fact, you face it a lot online. It works especially well if white just develops and allows black to take on d4. So if white just plays this, or especially knight c3, and this happens, black's already in very good shape. So d5 is typically going to be the reply there. Take the space, try to cramp black. And then we could get into a Benoni if black plays e6 here. This has various move orders, but a situation like this, where black fianchettos the dark square bishop, often tries for a6 and b5. Later, they do have a majority on the queen side. But in this game, black plays b5. The Benko, rather, I would say is a tough opening these days. I don't particularly believe in it anymore. I think It's an opening that the engine is pretty harsh on because black is sacrificing a pawn, and not for direct attacking play. It's more for the hopes of long-term strategic compensation by clearing out the queenside. So I take on b5, a6, and let me just show you, if we proceed down one of the main lines, like b takes a6 here, black can take the pawn right away if they want, but often they play g6. Here's how the old main line used to go. So bishop takes, e4, take, d6, let's say knight f3, g3. White castles by hand after this trade of the light square bishops. You used to see a lot of games like this where white's kind of playing some consolidating moves, maybe keeping black's knight out of g4, and then black looks to mass their pieces on the queen side and apply pressure on the A and the B files, because those files are cleared out from black's standpoint. They have half-open files to work with against these two pawns. Ignore what the feedback is saying. I'm just going to an illustrative position, which chess.com just took away from me. Thank you, chess.com. So I won't go through all that again, but that's what black's hoping for, that the files clear on the queen side and they have this long-term pressure against the A and the B pawns. And I'll be happy to go through that in another video in the future, maybe one that's a little more thematic for that. So it's perfectly fine for white to take. And again, that's probably the most challenging move here. There are some modern ways that black tries to play the Benko, with delaying or foregoing entirely the capture on a6 for a period of time. We won't get into that. But yeah, I like some of these in-between options where white takes the pawn on b5, but then plays a move like e3. So similarly, I've sometimes played, in response to b5, just a developing move like knight f3. Try to let black come to you and then gradually win the pawn back and just kind of build around the center. There are many variations like that that white can consider. So c takes b5, a6. I play this e3 move. Note that the e4 square is covered, so we can't put the pawn there. Let's click into the opening book. Yeah, g6 is the most popular move here. Just shrink this a little bit. g6 is the most popular. If a takes b5, white takes with the bishop in one go. There's a line that goes queen a5 check. You might have noticed that this is a tactical idea. Knight c3, defend the bishop here. Bishop b7, trying to renew the threat here. Bishop d2, eyeing the queen. Black can't do this and then hope to take here because they run into the royal fork. So queen b6. And then here, white can attempt to defend this and this for a while, but I actually prefer to play just knight f3 in this position. This is what I recommend in my course. Knight takes d5, trade the knights, and then play a4. So you actually allow black to win the pawn back in the center, but you play like this. You support the bishop. This bishop can come here pretty quickly. And white enjoys a good position. Castling. Let's say white castles. Taking here gives black some counterplay after rook g8. So castles. Let's say knight d2, looking for e4, looking for knight c4. Sometimes the queen can pop out here. I find this type of position to be pretty pleasant for white. This a pawn is valuable in a lot of cases. It's annoying on the edge of the board. So that's another variation, just starting with this a takes b5 move. But my opponent plays the g6 move in reply. Yep, knight c3. Bishop g7. Sorry, clunky UI. Yeah, bishop g7, and then I played simply knight f3 here, which is the most popular move. a4, e4 also played. There's some flexibility for both sides. Yeah, castles. a4 is what I played in this position, still following main line. Yeah, and here's where I was kind of critical of starting with black's play. Queen a5. Don't think queen a5 helps black very much. Yeah, top move is e6. Let's see what's played historically here. d6, bishop e7, e6. Percentages aren't terrible for black. I mean, they're pretty favorable for white, but not the absolute worst I've seen in major openings for black. So yeah, e6 undermines the center. Looks like there's several games like this, and then queen d6 trying to block black. Interesting. I think black hopes to gradually break this blockade somehow and maybe advance the d-pawn. What about d6? d6, e4. Yeah, sometimes white does two-step with this pawn. A takes b5, bishop takes b5. Just kind of seeing some of how the popular variations go here. Bishop a6. Because at least if there's a trade that happens here and white doesn't take with the pawn, black can hope to use this b4 square in the future. So if we get a swap or something at some point, black may look to anchor the knight in. This starts to more look like a normal Benko. The Benko accepted, where black has hopes of using these files and applying pressure to the white position. But yeah, lots of games here. Bishop d2, probably angling for something similar. Bishop takes b5, a takes b5. And if this happens, this is somewhat like the game, although white has not been able to play the b pawn to the a file and get those two connected pawns. So if black takes on b5 and a pawn ends up here, I think black wants to keep these pawns both on the b file, keep them doubled. So let's see what the computer says about queen a5. Yeah, doesn't like it very much. About doubles the advantage for white. So not fatal yet by any means for black, but seems to play into white's hands with this bishop d2 reply. And it wants black to take here, and I agree with that, because this is another moment where I can't take with the a pawn because I lose on a1. So I would have played bishop takes b5 almost certainly. Maybe black can duck back into something along the lines of what I was talking about, where black can try to use the a and the b file. And gradually, I'm going to try to improve my position. Maybe I'll try to go for e5 in the future. That is an idea, trying to advance against this d6 pawn and the knight. In the long term, white hopes to use these pawns, but it can be tough to get through, especially with some holes in the position. So I think that's about the best possible outcome for black at this stage. Yeah, it's telling that one of the top moves here for black is queen d8. So it wants the queen to go back. This is there's some Scandi vibes to this, but I know in a Scandi, when the queen is here and you're underdeveloped, you usually don't want to have to retreat. You usually want to keep developing if you can. So that's not a good sign for black. Yeah, I thought rook a3 was nice. That's one of the top engine moves. Bishop d7 also seemed awkward because it doesn't really help black take here. And again, queen d8 is recommended. Knight bd7. You know, I'd also think about bishop g4 and then knight bd7. Although, I guess I could take on a6 at the moment black does that. But yeah, maybe something like this. Try to divert the bishop and then play this. That could be playable when my bishop is not backing up the pawn. Yeah, I'd look to solve this issue if I were black. Try to develop those pieces harmoniously. But bishop d7, I'm just staring at this knight, and that knight never found a good way to get in the game. It just ended up staying on that square and sacrificing itself for the pawn when it hit the a6 square. And it was definitely too late for black at that point. So bishop e2. Yep, queen c7. If queen b6 was played, I don't know if I would have done this, but I mentioned a5 followed by b6 is an option. Just anchor this pawn in on a protected square. So queen c7. And I just castled because I was more than happy when black took here to take with the a pawn and achieve this resulting pawn structure. I was ecstatic about that transformation. So yeah, e6 wants black to think about counterplay here. That is another main idea. If black's not going to try to move the bishop and get the knight in the game, is to try to stab at the white center. Because at least if I play e4 and we get a trade here, black can claim that this pawn is isolated and maybe black has some play down the e file. There's some hope here. But I personally think the engine, at least here on chess.com, is underselling white's position. This looks terrible for black to me. And it's only 0.81. But let's just play out some of the top moves because I'm kind of curious. Here, a4, knight bd7, queen c2, rook a8. Yeah, this looks pretty natural. Eval's ticking up a little bit. h3, take. Here, let's say rook a1. That's fair. Knight c4. Yeah, maybe some temporary activity for black. I think it all hinges on whether black can keep these pawns blockaded on the queen side. If this pawn gets to a5, it's going to be all over pretty quickly. I kind of feel a position like this is a technical win, but black can dig in. I recognize black has a lot of blockading potential on these squares. But knight h5 also didn't help black much. Unveils the bishop, but it puts the knight on a pretty useless square. The knight can't go forward here. So probably about the last chance black has here very soon to do something like e6 or try to solve this rearrangement. I just played a4, connect the pawns. Yep, queen a5, queen b3. Steady everything here. Now we're up to +2. Black took here. I really didn't like that move either, giving that strong bishop. But if black doesn't address that knight, this is a good point, what the engine is demonstrating here. I might move the knight, unveil the attack on the queen. Let's just say the queen goes somewhere, and then a5. And again, the pawns get connected on the 5th rank. So too far gone for black at this point. And we're just advancing with tempo here. Here I mentioned both a6 and b7 look winning. Other moves are suggested by the engine too. Rook a1. And again, a6, if I went with that one, the idea is just to take advantage of the same situation in the game in a different move order. So b7 coming with tempo, severing the coordination between the queen and the knight. And these squares are covered, so black can't defend that piece. Yeah, take here. And I was getting ready just to play something like rook b1, followed by queen b6. I think I mentioned this knight d2 maneuver. Also looks plenty good, trying to come here. We're up a piece and no counterplay whatsoever for black. All right, so hopefully this gave you a bit of a primer on this e3 variation of the Benko. The Benko can be kind of a confusing opening. It's definitely like a higher level gambit for black. I wouldn't recommend it to many players these days, to be honest. I think you have to be fairly advanced to understand it, for one thing. And just theoretically speaking, the Benko is in tough shape from what I've seen. You don't see a lot of GMs venturing it these days. But there are a couple more modern ways to play it if you're curious about it. So, yeah, not Violin's best game. But again, that's the level difference that gets compounded pretty quickly over the course of several moves, and just that consistent difference in decision making. Don't fault them for it. Don't feel like games are less valuable as a result of that. The ratings are pretty accurate in chess at the end of the day, unless someone is, provisional or using assistance or something, which I haven't run into one of those players in a long time, which I'm grateful for. The ratings usually tell the story at the end of the day. All right, let me know if you guys have any questions. Maybe you've picked up a little weapon you can use from the white side if you're a d4 player. Thanks again for watching, guys, and I'll see you again soon.